Alright, so how to tune your e-bike, your electric motorcycle. If you set your controller up right, if you followed my last two videos and got field weakening and speeds and ratios and speeds and gear set, you shouldn't really need a lot of tuning. What we're basically doing here is we're seeing if our e-bike is going as fast as it will go. So we want to be able to go fast as it will safely go, or see if we need to upgrade something. Maybe a bigger controller, a bigger motor, a better battery. And how to determine when we need that part and what to upgrade first to make our bike faster. Now this is not one of those videos where I just unleash 60,000 watts to the rear wheel and get a really epic quarter-mile time and make a good YouTube video. We can do that. I can put 60 grand at this rear wheel right now and get a 10-second quarter-mile, but I'm going to damage something because my system was not designed for it. So chances are you have a system that's matched, a motor, a controller, and a battery. And you want to start upgrading it. You want to tune it to make it faster. First, we got to make sure we're going as fast as we can with what we have, and then second, to see what the upgrade. I'll focus on quarter-mile times just because our main goal, I think, is to outrun that Lamborghini at the stoplight. Quarter-mile is a good way to tune it, or even an eighth a mile if you don't want to go that fast. I think you can run eighth miles in like 70 miles an hour. Quarter-mile is going to take you around 90, 95 on something this big. Now, this won't be specific to your bike. I have a ND 96 1000, that's 450 line amps and 1000 phase amps max, a 400 amp hour discharge battery, and I have a 20,000 watt motor in the back. But this should apply to whatever you have. The logic should apply, the method should apply. And this is not to tell you what settings to put in your controller. One of the dumbest things I see, and it's not the people are dumb, they just don't know, when they're tuning their carburetors, is they'll ask, what jetting do I use? And the only person worse than the person asking what jetting do you use is the person answering that question. They're usually asking that question based on a particular carburetor. But the truth is there's so many more variables that go into it. There's your altitude you're at, your humidity, the temperature, how much you weigh, there's how your valves are set, how big the engine is, how the engine's running, how you've maintained it. There's just so many variables that the jetting is going to be very personal for each rider and how you want it to ride. So that's kind of like this. This is not to show you what numbers to put in there. This is to show you how to know what numbers to put in there. How to tune your e-bike for you and how you like it. So don't believe the hype, guys. No one has any special sauce, magic, mojo, or voodoo that they do to make them master tuners. Is nothing like that. It's scientific method, and that's it. Now, we're going to apply scientific method to this. We're not going to use some voodoo crap and get our bikes tuned right. Don't be fooled by what you see on the internet. All these guys with bikes just like yours that go way faster than yours. Right now I've got a good reliable e-bike. It's really enjoyable to ride. The battery costs $2,000. I don't want to screw it up. I'd like to take care of it and give it good longevity. So I'm not going to impress people with these quarter-mile times. I'm just wanting the bike to be fast as it can and still be reliable and not prematurely wear out or explode or blow up and have a Chinese battery fire. So you'll see guys on YouTube, they'll slap a bigger controller on their Suron. Maybe they'll bypass the BMS, maybe they'll get rid of the BMS, all sorts of things, and they'll get great times. Yeah, keep following those guys. You're going to find out they don't have many videos past that because their shit breaks. Because they might be exceeding what the manufacturer intended. They might think they know more than the engineers do. They might know just enough to be dangerous. I also want to do a run in just the graph page, and I want to screen record it. This initial run, I've got the line amp set at 425, and note the volts before I start, 104. You also see 42 kilowatts for maximum power, 451 line amps, and 788 on the phase at 917 RPM. Our field weakening kicks on at 1590, and the phase amps pretty much tank after that down to 380 or something. Those are the kind of things you want to look for. I also want to do a recording with my battery page up. 4 on this
is the average unit voltage drop over the course of the quarter mile. I'm looking at the current I pull. And I'm also monitoring the temperature, the MOSFET temperature, and the cell pack temperatures.
So the battery discharge conundrum of trying to make your bike go faster, how many amps you can discharge it at into the rear wheel, is really important. So I have these EVE 40P cells. I think they're 3.7 volts. Now you've all seen these e-bike batteries cut open, and they look like a bunch of little AA batteries inside there. Those are the cells. In my case, as a EVE 40P, those are 3.7 volts nominal. Now fully charged are like 4.189 volts. Cells are connected in parallel, and when you make a parallel connection, you don't change the voltage. They stay the same. It just gets stronger and stronger and stronger, but the same volt. In my case, it's a 16P that you see on batteries. So I have 16 of those little batteries all connected in parallel. They equal 3.7 volts, but they have a lot more strength than just one. And the 16 is where I get my 64 amp hour battery. And one of those sets of 16 batteries all in parallel making 3.7 volts, that's a unit. You can see the units here. Then you're going to put the units together in series, and when you go in series you increase voltage. I've got 26S, so I've got a 16P 26S battery. The S is 26 of these units in series, and when you add 26 of them up, 26 times 3.7 volts, there's my 96 volt battery. If you were just building a 72 volt battery, you could have a 16P and 20S. 20 times 3.7 would give you 72 volts. And of course that's nominal voltage, so if you take the 4.189, the fully charged state, you're going to end up with your 108 volt battery or whatever it is when it's fully charged. But the most important thing here we're going to talk about is temperature on these batteries. Now you can look up a temperature chart on these EVE 40P cells, and it will let you know a discharge rate on which temperature you get to. And generally for e-bikes that don't have water-cooled batteries or anything thermally controlling, we're going to just use 60 degrees Celsius as our max. There's even warnings on the battery manufacturer specs that say do not exceed maximum of 80 degrees Celsius. So 60 degrees Celsius is our comfort number. Again, you want to make some impressive YouTube videos, yeah, you can run them to 80C, but you're not going to have that $2,000 battery for long. If you look at like a Mollicell 50B or a EVE 40PL, you can discharge those at a much higher rate before they reach that temperature. You get what you pay for. Now I got the cheap EVE 40, so when you do the math, I'm looking at 20 amps per cell. If I take 16 times 20 amps, I'm at 320 amps. That's my max continuous discharge. Why did the manufacturer, Amorge, tell me that I am good for 400 amps continuous? Yeah, so Amorge said my battery was 400 amps continuous? Lies, lies, lies. Why would they lie to me? Well, the truth is, I can barely hold 400 amps continuous. I'd be flying off the road at 90 miles an hour hitting mailboxes and trash cans. So that'll never happen. I have a 320 amp battery. So they got the amps all wrong, but I know why they did it. But one common thread you'll see on e-bikes is when they're climbing hills, they overheat. Even in stock configuration, they overheat because I really don't have a 400 amp battery. So if I took my bike and tried to climb Pikes Peak with it, thinking I could run 400 continuous amps all the way up, my bike would overheat because I might be at 400 amps the whole way up. It's so steep. And you see these e-bikes overheating on hill climbs in stock configuration, and that's why. It's really not 400 amps, it's 320. So knowing this, we can set the BMS at 320 where it belongs and not overheat our bike, and we can ride up Pikes Peak full throttle continuous and not have to worry about it. And that's why it's good to know these kind of things.
And it could be your motor that's overheating on these hill climbs. Take this motor I've got, it's huge. It's a 20,000 watt motor continuous. That's only able to handle 208 amps continuous. If you take 20,000 watts divided by 96, you get 208 amps. Let's do a deeper dive on this chart. You can search in Google MOOCH test for your battery type. Mine is EVE40P. This is why my numbers don't work on your e-bike, because the chances of you having these batteries in this size of a battery pack and motor and everything else is pretty remote. So I searched this on Google, and you'll see it under e-cigarettes. They use these little batteries in single ones in e-cigarettes, vape machines, I guess. And that's okay. Click on that. You'll see these charts. If you look at that blue line, that's a 20 amp discharge. It's saying that I can run my battery at a 20 amp discharge all the way to dead and never go over 60 degrees. So that's safe. So I can run this battery till dead on that line. So that's the 20 amp line. And 20 times 16, that's where we get our 320 amp limit on this battery for a max continuous. 320 amps from the time you take off to the time the battery dies, you can do that. So it's not 400 amps. Look at the next line down, the purple line. Let's say I want to go 30 amps. And I can actually take it 30 amps all the way to discharge, but look what I'm going to hit, 79 degrees. That's too close to my 80 max. That's where batteries start swelling and deforming and heating up and having problems. Matter of fact, if I look at my BMS, I can't even go that high. I've got a high temperature protect at 60 degrees on these cells, and I'm not going to change that. So if I go over that, I'm dead in the water. And if you look down lower, you can see the MOSFET high temperature protect is at 80 degrees because it does run a little higher, and then it turns back on at 65 degrees. But my cells don't turn back on till 55 degrees. So I don't want to keep it at 79 or 80 all the way to discharge. So I'd want to limit my time in the 30 amps. Now let's say I want to take off for a drag race and I want to run 50 amps. Look at that yellow line. You can see it hits 80 degrees right away, pretty quickly, way before it discharges. It's getting too hot. The BMS is going to turn that off. It's going to shut your bike down. Hopefully, if your BMS works. This is why you want to have a BMS. So at 50 amps, I'm limited by a certain amount of time. So I'm pulling 800 line amps. Yeah, I can pull 800 line amps, but only for a very short duration. This is why boost, or the boost button, is such an important feature when you're doing this kind of tuning and drag racing. Don't think of it as the ultimate power button, but more of a protect button. You can set a limit for how many seconds you're in boost, and then also the recovery time, so you can go and boost again, so the battery has a chance to cool back down. And what is that duration? I don't know. I have to look at the temperature to find out. If it's getting to 80 degrees here, I want to go somewhere here before it hits 60 and stop my test. And I could run to like 70 and really push it, but I'm going to use 60 as a max. I don't know where that happens. And I can find out if I had a big enough controller. My controller won't pull 800 amps. It's a 450 amp line controller. I'll never find out this answer. But if I had a big enough controller, and this is the mistake people make, they add a huge controller and they go faster because they're jumping up in this 50 amp area. That's all fine and good until you overheat your battery pack and you catch on fire. You have to understand where your limit is on that 50 amp curve, and you have to look at temperature if you're going to go to a bigger controller than your system's designed for.
So all that has to be taken in consideration by the guy tuning your bike, or by yourself if you are tuning it. I know it's easy to get on there and just start jacking shit up and discharge this thing at 600 amps. And remember, I did it when I first got the bike. I don't know what my 0 to 60 time is now, maybe 4.7, somewhere in that range. But I did the 0 to 60 time at 3.0 when I first got it. I didn't know any better. I just turned the amps up. I was discharging at almost 600 amps. So yeah, I probably could have got my 10-second quarter mile. Made for a great YouTube video, but guess what? Now I'm buying a new battery in like a month. So don't get too wrapped around what you see on YouTube, these e-bike experts, and they're all getting these great times and fast bikes. And if you have unlimited funds and you're drag racing, sure, you can bust through these batteries and get 80 kilowatts to the rear wheel. No big deal. Doesn't matter if you burn your motor out. But if you're wanting a nice, reliable ride, it's also as fast as you can go and be safe, then pay attention to what your battery's doing, your rear wheel, your controller, things like that. A lot of guys on YouTube look like experts, but trust me, a lot of these guys don't know what they're doing. And I'm one of them. I'm the guy that doesn't know what he's doing, and you're watching this video, but I'm trying to learn it.
Alright, well, we let this e-bike charge up for the next run. Let's evaluate some of this stuff we discovered so we can make some adjustments. Let's start out with the Ant BMS. Everything we need to see should be right here. We'll keep repeating this run, the quarter mile on the Ant BMS, how much current we're pulling. So obviously we're going to start out with 0, and then towards the end of the run, the current's going to increase and it gets up to about 411 amps, and that gave us our power. It even shows that on there, 39,500 on the watts. The next thing you want to look at is average unit voltage. When the run starts out, it's 4.08. And you can see as the run goes, it drops down to a low of around 3.7. Yeah, it looks like 3.755. That's an important number. And that's a difference of 0.333. That means the voltage in the units dropped 0.33 volts for that quarter-mile run. Now, a good rule of thumb is the discharge should not exceed a 0.5 volt per cell drop. So I pulled 411 amps off this. It looks like I have the ability to draw more amps because I'm only dropping 0.33 volts. And you can watch this on your graph page. If you take your 0.5 volt drop, for example, that's your maximum. You can look at your graph page between the start of your quarter mile and the end of your quarter mile. You shouldn't drop more than 13 volts. That's because we have 26 of these units, remember? 26 3.7 volt units. 26 times 0.5, that's your 13 volts. We don't want to drop more than 13 volts on that graph page from the resting state to the full-on line amp pull state. The next thing we want to look at is MOS temperature. It starts out around 44 degrees, and as the race keeps going, it climbs up, and you can see it climbs higher than the temperatures below it. The temperatures below it are cell temperatures. There's 4 of them. There's a lot more than 4 cells, but the manufacturer randomly puts sensors in about 4 cells, so you can see what your cell temperature is doing. The cell temperature is slower to respond, but heat migration will cause them to rise even after you've stopped. Once you've stopped or slowed down or drive conservatively, your MOS temperature will come down, but those cell temperatures won't. You got to be aware of those. And remember, the cell temperatures are the ones on the BMS that max out at 60. The bike protects itself and turns your battery off. The MOS temperature can go to 80, and the bike protects itself and turns it off. So the run we did with 425 amps, that's what we're looking at here. We increased the MOS temperature up to 52 degrees. So that's not that bad out of a potential 80 for the shutoff. We can probably go to 60 degrees on that safely. So I've got room on the volt drop and the temperature. As far as cell temperature, we go from 42 degrees and it stays 42 degrees the whole time. Now after we stop or do a few runs, that'll start creeping up. But I'm definitely not limiting myself on temperature or voltage drop yet. You have to manage these temps when you're driving. You have to be aware of them. And that's why, again, the boost switch is good, because the boost switch, you're going to give it a time, you're going to give it a turn off point, and you're going to give it a recovery point. So it's a lot safer. But if you're not using a boost switch, you need to monitor these temperatures. So the obvious adjustments I want to make is I want to add voltage till I hit either 0.5 volt drop or till I hit, we'll say 55 degrees in my T1, T2 through T4 temperatures, or 60 degrees in the MOS temperatures. And that's your limit for adding amps to your bike, is that voltage drop or your temperature increase. Whichever one comes first, that's what you got to protect. Stressing out your battery like this, and you're going to be pushing it harder, you're destroying the longevity of it. If this battery heats up to 60 degrees, the consequences are a 0.2% loss in capacity. So if I do 10 of these runs and heat it to 60 degrees on all 10 runs, I just lost 2% of my battery. If I do 100 runs, I've lost 20% of my battery. So now I have a battery that only has a capacity of 80%. They wear out quick. When you're pushing these batteries right to their maximum, you will make them deteriorate faster and you will lose longevity. I'm just doing this for the video. Well, after the video, I'll probably lower these amps back down, just make the bike nice to ride again. So the obvious solution is increase the line amps to increase performance. But there are examples where you want to lower the line amps. Let's say you're getting an excess in voltage sag. You're getting near that 13 volts if you have a 96 volt system, a 26S. You can sag the volts so low that you may require field weakening, but you have too many amps going to torque and the volts can't increase to bring your RPM up. So in ratios to speed, you can use this area to limit your line amps. You can also limit it up in the top where max line amps are, but you can use your ratios and speed to limit it to what they call choking off the line amps. If you can choke those line amps off, you can recover volts. Your voltage will actually increase, and that'll of course increase RPM and give you better speed. Now I did try this. I went ahead and put 400 line amps in just to see. I didn't want to mess with all the ratios and speeds, so I just lowered my overall line amps to see if I could field weaken earlier and it would help. It didn't. I got a slower time. So I'm back in the garage and I'm going to now increase my amps until I see either a 0.5 volt per cell decrease, which is 13 volts overall on the graph page, or I see 55 degrees in the cell temp, or I see 60 degrees in the MOS temp. And whichever one of those I hit first, that's where I'm going to stop.
I've been waiting all day for this time of the day. It's 100 degrees in the shade in Florida. It is hot, but that's good because I want to test these cells. I don't care about the quarter mile times or speeds or anything. I'm just going to go out and run a quarter mile, and I'm going to run it in the graph page, and then next I'm going to run it in the battery page, so I get 2 runs on that battery. And I've got the line amps at 450, and I want to make sure I don't sag below 0.5, and I also want to make sure I don't go over my 55 degrees on the cells or 60 degrees on the MOS. It's a good time to heat them up in the hottest part of the day. Gives it the worst case scenario. Here we go, graph page run. That should be about a quarter mile. Usually somewhere around 95 or so. Now I'll record the BMS page. And let's hit it. And I'm going to do a couple of throttle stabs on this one, get it some more heat. Kind of a double whammy. All right, go back to the garage, evaluate those, and see where to go from there. All right, back from the garage. Not a lot to do. We were at a 0.399, so 0.4 volts per cell, 11.8 drop overall, I think, which is acceptable. 30 something degrees and 48 degrees, I think, so the temperatures were not bad on the MOS or the cells, so those aren't a limiting feature. The limit I have is I can only put in 450 amp because I've got a 450 line, 1000 phase, ND 96 1000 controller, so that's my limiting feature. But we're going to go run the quarter mile. This is as much as I can do safely for it and still take care of my bike. But only now, only after all these tests, I can upgrade my controller. Now I know I need a bigger controller. But just to willy-nilly slap a bigger controller on your bike is a bad idea. You want to do all this test first and make sure your battery can handle the bigger controller, and also of course your motor. Now I know my motor can. I've got a 20,000 watt hub motor, so I'm really not too worried about that. But if you have like, you know, a 5,000 watt hub or 6,000, something in there, yeah, your motor needs to be part of that equation too. Well, I'll go out and get a quarter mile run on it, see what my best time is, see if I improved it any from the beginning one. Hey, 13.17, we got better time right there. Yeah, a little bit of an improvement. Well, it's interesting, my 0 to 60 got slower. So it was 4.47 originally. The 400 amps put me at 4.59. And then I just did a 4.49. 2/100ths slower. Maybe I'll do a 0 to 60 here and take off. That's all I really care about. I just want to beat a Lambo at a stoplight, you know? Let me see if I can beat that 0 to 60. Zero to 60. So it is faster than the 0 to 60 also. That's cool. I'm gonna do another one. It is better 0 to 60. I just didn't take off good. So maybe my quarter mile might have been even better too, but I don't really care about the quarter mile, so no big deal. So what I'm gonna do is get a bigger controller. And we'll find out if a bigger controller makes your bike faster. And also we'll tune it with a bigger controller, and maybe we'll get more into field weakening and stuff. Make for a good video. A fellow moped rider up here. Might have to go to button 3 to beat this guy. I think that's a Honda Metropolitan. Cool bike. So I didn't hear me coming. I think I surprised him. Now he's probably wishing he bought a Maddog when he sees how fast this bitch is.